Welcome everyone to leveraging Omnisoc and existing cybersecurity staff. Here you'll get to hear from people in charge of operational security at 4 of the founding Omnisoc member institutions. I'm Andrew Korty, your panel moderator today. We'll start by having the panelists introduce themselves, and then I'll give a little bit of background of the CISO perspective of the launch of the Omnisoc. And we'll get to questions, both prepared and from you, the audience. So I'll ask each panel member to introduce themselves, explain their role in their organization, and maybe talk about the key factors leading to their organization's decision to join the Omnisoc as a founding member. So let's start with Bill Lansbury, who's the AVP of Enterprise Infrastructure at Rutgers. Bill?
Thank you, Andrew. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to represent the Omnisoc today. As you said, I'm the Associate Vice President of Enterprise Infrastructure at Rutgers University. I'm responsible for inside and outside plant, the servers, data centers, and the VoIP system, as well as SOC operations. So although I'm the only one on the panel that's not a CISO, I take on the role of the operations side of the house. At Rutgers, we do have somebody else that handles the governance, risk, and compliance area. So it's really 2 people. And just to let folks know, we are in the hunt for a CISO full-time right now. There's a posting at rutgers.edu. So if you're interested and you have the qualifications, please throw your hat in the ring. Thanks again, Andy.
Sure thing, and good luck with that.
Real quick, Andrew also asked, what led us into joining Omnisoc. When we first started talking about Omnisoc, Rutgers was brand new to the Big Ten. So one of the main things that Rutgers wanted to do is we wanted to contribute, as quickly as we could to a Big Ten Academic Alliance initiative going forward. It was pretty easy to see that this was a good one to contribute to, because we got a huge amount of value for what would be minimal investment. So if we would have tried to do something like this on our own, it would have cost, anywhere in, 5 to 10 times the cost of doing it with our Big Ten peers. And if you happen to be listening to the CIOs earlier this morning, you probably heard the same from each of the inaugural CIOs as well. Thanks, Andy.
Sure thing, and good luck with that CISO search. Next up is Rick Howgard, AVP of Information Technology Services at University of Nebraska.
Thanks, Andy. Again, Rick Howgard, University of Nebraska. My responsibility is for the information security side of the house. I think the decision for us, just like in Rutgers' case, to join Omnisoc was pretty straightforward. We had invested in a commercial managed security services provider for probably somewhere between 5 and 7 years when the Omnisoc opportunity came up, and that commercial relationship had gotten to the point that I pretty much felt like there was a timer, and every time the timer hit that specific time, we would start to get some of our notices or alerts. And so an opportunity to do something with our Big Ten peers, continue that concept of having additional eyes on our environment, looking at what was going on, but from a higher ed focus was really attractive. So that's what drove our interest in participation.
All right, thank you, Rick. And last but not least, Noel Arnold, Deputy CISO at Northwestern.
Yes, good afternoon. So as mentioned, I'm at Northwestern University. I'm the Deputy CISO. If people don't know where Northwestern lives, we're on the north side of Chicago, just about 12 miles from downtown. And I'm relatively new to the higher ed space. So prior to that, I was with mostly financial services sectors and for about 18 years. So transitioning to higher ed, where it's a lot different landscape, was really interesting to me. And so I've been here 3 years, and we came on board prior to my joining the team, but it's my understanding that we were just starting up a an initiative to do SOC type activities within Northwestern, and I thought that supplementing it with the Omnisoc would help us advance that quicker and further than we could have done on our own. So we bought some tools to augment our staff, but the Omnisoc has gone a long way towards advancing our ability to have visibility and do threat hunting within what we see and what we pass on to Omnisoc.
Thanks, Noel. And just a little bit about myself. I'm the CISO at Indiana. I started with IU Security Office in 1999 as a security engineer and gradually moved into a leadership role. As a team, our office is responsible for what you'd expect. So standards administration, technical risk assessment programs, security reviews and consulting, technical security resources, and technical responses to security incidents for all IU campuses throughout Indiana. And now, just a point of clarification, IU is both the host of the Omnisoc and a customer and founding member. So as such, I represent IU, the member, just like our esteemed panelists here. I'm more a customer of the Omnisoc than a provider. And I was delighted to get involved with this project for many of the reasons that have already been stated. I like I always like when things can be tailored to higher ed, in much the way Rick was talking about all of the alerts dropping at one time of the day. That's not really conducive to the environment that we're in. And not only that, but it's good to know that when we receive an alert, it's been filtered through that context of a research, teaching, and learning environment. And I think we've all dealt with some service providers that are more attuned to the corporate world. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but to a varying degree, they're able to be more or less useful to us, depending on how well they can sort of match with what we're doing. So before we get to questions, let's start with a little background here, just to sort of set the scene. Hold on, a bit of a technical difficulty here. All right. So I won't go into the whole story of the Omnisoc's inception, because I think that has been told many times, including in the past couple of days. So I do want to give the typical perspective, what I think is the typical perspective, and my colleagues may agree or disagree with me later in the questions and answers, but of an information security leader going through this process and taking this kind of initiative. So I think that every cybersecurity leader is faced with a near insurmountable pile of issues to address, and they all seem to be of the highest priority. And over time, security incidents have only increased in number and severity, and the university funding picture has generally, I mean, this may vary, but generally stayed flat or maybe even declined for some folks. As a CISO, you often face the problem of you always have more work than you have staff for. So you start to think about, well, what are our peers doing? And in my case, I realize they're basically all in the same boat, or even worse, they're spending most of their resources doing the exact same thing that my team is doing. And so, I remember reading that it made me think of this article about that I read about the world's financial institutions getting together and more or less deciding that security isn't going to be an area of competition for them, that it's best for everybody if they collaborate in fighting cybercrime. There are plenty of other ways they compete in a cutthroat fashion, but they decided that that wasn't it for cybersecurity. And if the fiercely competitive banks are collaborating, then why wouldn't we in higher ed, an industry renowned for working together, do the same? So if you haven't noticed, our panel, and until recently our membership in the Omnisoc, was made up entirely of Big Ten institutions. And I want to be clear that, Rick and Bill and Noel and I and the other Big Ten CISOs have already been collaborating for years as part of the Big Ten Academic Alliance. And within the BTAA, we have the security working group, which is made up of all those CISOs and their staff. So, and before pandemic, in fact, we would have in-person meetings 3 times a year, rotating among the various campuses. And we still have virtual meetings and communicate very frequently, and even have our own sort of shorthand and inside jokes and all that. It's very, very good rapport, very tight group. Now, this group's efforts historically comprise things like, license agreements for security products, like endpoint security products, things like that. We compare techniques and playbooks. We'd share stories of incidents, maybe work on some documentation that we might be able to repurpose across our institutions. I'll be straight with you, just commiserating on some of the trials and tribulations of being a CISO. But lately, in the past few years, I think we've tried to address some of the issues I've just been talking about a little more deeply, and started to think about how we can take this great collaborative group and really start taking advantage of the strengths of the individual institutions. Now, while all of us have our own institutional knowledge and we're the best people to work directly with our own faculty, staff, and students, if we can rely on each other for more back-end kind of services, things can get much more efficient. So, in my mind, with the right arrangement, if we do it right, it can be like taking your existing security team and doubling or even tripling the size of it effectively. So, and as you heard from Von Welch and Scott Orr's remarks this morning, it was out of these kinds of conversations that Brad Wheeler, IU's former VP for IT and CIO, and Tom Davis, the founding executive director of the Omnisoc, proposed the Omnisoc initiative to our Big Ten colleagues. Now, as you all know, the Omnisoc isn't limited to the Big Ten and never was meant to be. And I was delighted to hear that Santa Clara University will now be joining us. The weather here in Indianapolis is actually kind of nice today, but it has been single-digit temperatures the last couple of weeks. And I was looking at pictures of Santa Clara thinking, man, this place is a paradise. We've got palm trees and sunny skies. I don't know if Vaughn is in attendance right now, but once pandemic clears, I think we need some sort of member CISO gathering at Santa Clara. Who's with me? By the way, fun fact, I almost misspelled the title of this slide because my high school mascot was the Broncos, but spelled with an H, BRONCHOS, due to some ancient misspelling way back that stuck. So if there are any Santa Clara folks listening, be glad you don't have to deal with that ignominy. All right, so always a bit of acrobatics here to stop the sharing. To bring us back to reality from our fair weather reverie there, let's move to some questions. If we've had any from the audience, we can start with those. Otherwise, I'll launch into a few of my own. Okay, so don't hesitate to send us questions while we're talking, and we'll make every effort to get to those. I'll just have Victor interrupt at an opportune time to let me know about those. So let's begin. So number one, out of the millions of security alerts it receives, Omnisoc sends, on average, 1 to 2 alerts to member institutions per week. And let me start with asking Bill, do you find this approach of trying to provide only high quality actionable alerts to be beneficial to your organization, and why?
Thanks again, Andy. I think the approach of quality over quantity is highly beneficial. We often get caught up in our own investigations that take up analysts' time without uncovering any actionable incidents. When items come from the Omnisoc, there's a confidence level not found in many other sources. And that being said, in situations of high volume with high confidence, we'd rather the items be reported for investigation than limit the alerts. I think Rutgers might be a little unique in this, is that we've actually asked for even additional alerts if they're available, as our team is trying to learn the threat hunting, and then they can take the information and bring it back to our IPS and our IDS on campus. But the nice thing is when we do get something from Omnisoc, it's real, right? It's an actionable item. It's not a wild goose chase, so to say. Thanks, Andy.
Rick, do you find this to be the case as well at Nebraska?
Absolutely. I think like Rutgers and even Northwestern, the advantage of having these things vetted a little bit before they get to our analyst is really tremendous. I had one of my senior security operations staff calculate for us a couple of years ago, based on all of the alerts that we generate our own through our log management system and other sources, what amount of time is taken trying to validate whether or not those are real, and then how many of them need to be followed up on, and using some fairly conservative estimates of up to 2 hours per incident to look through all of the different places to verify how real it is. He was going to need 7 or 8 additional people just to handle the triage. And so having Omnisoc do a lot of that work for us and bubble up only the most critical ones really helps the team focus on the things that are most important during every day.
Yeah, we do the same thing at Northwestern as well. Our analysts are very, their time is short, right? And we're a very small team. So they, to be able to let them focus on advancing the security posture of the university through other initiatives and not have to spend their time going down the rabbit holes that analysts typically have to do in other, organizations. It really allows us to retain and get new people that want to advance their career in something other than just triaging incidents that never go anywhere.
Very good. Yeah, I agree. It's great not to have to keep those long term important but not urgent projects off the back burner for a change and be able to advance some of those things. I'm going to start with Rick this time and ask, to what degree does Omnisoc replace your network intrusion detection system? Or if it doesn't, then how do the two complement each other?
Yeah, I don't think we've seen any indication that it'll be able to replace what we're doing from an intrusion detection point of view, but it absolutely supplements it. I think we are pretty active of trying to keep our threat intelligence information coming in and try to stop as much stuff as we can through that IDS layer on top of what the services are we're getting back from Omnisoc.
So is there any, just to follow up, Rick, is there any certain type of thing Omnisoc is picking up on that your team normally wouldn't have time to focus on?
I think many times what Omnisoc is able to provide are things that they're getting from some of the other schools, or that they're getting out of the industry itself. And they're able to do some specific threat hunting on our campus and say, hey, this particular vulnerability or IOC is something that we have seen on these devices. And then we're able to go directly to those devices rather than have to do that preliminary investigative work on our own.
And Bill, have you found that as well?
Yeah, I think, to echo what Rick just said, I think one of the big additions that we get from Omnisoc is that we know if you find something in Rick's network, you're immediately looking for it in Noel's network and or my network. As far as the NIDS question, we look at it, it's more of a complementary relationship. So we still need our IDS to, further hunt the information that's coming back from the Omnisoc. But it's invaluable. The other thing, Rick had mentioned in the beginning that he had been with a corporate SOC for 5 to 7 years. I've never, had the, I don't know the good experience or the bad experience of that. But what I do find that's nice with the Omnisoc, and I'm assuming it doesn't exist if you go out to a corporate partner, is we can really get detailed conversations with the Omnisoc, right? So we don't just get an alert, right? We get the alert. We get to speak to your engineering team at the Omnisoc. We have weekly, discussions with the entire group, right? Not just, the Omnisoc, but with Indiana, Nebraska, and Northwestern. And I think those are some of the things that I think are invaluable as being a member of the Omnisoc. And, hopefully soon Santa Clara will see the same thing.
If you don't mind me asking, are there particular kinds of sources that you're sending to the Omnisoc?
Yeah, we send you everything. Well, not you, but we send Omnisoc. We send Palo Alto logs, we send Cisco logs, we send our IDS, we send IPS, soon to be sending you our AMP logs. And, it's really helpful for you guys to coordinate all that, send it back, pinpoint where we need to look in our own logs so we can actually locate the actual intrusion and mitigate it.
I think I'm the same way. I'm just like, what else can we send?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Noel, is that the same for you?
Yeah, I would say so. We're sending more than just NIDS, and I think NIDS is going to be around forever. But NIDS is, much like antivirus, is signature based. So there's always that point in time between when a threat is out there to when a NIDS manufacturer puts out the signatures. So I think we're us sending our firewall and DNS logs and soon to be endpoint security logs to Omnisoc, where they can do analysis right away rather than us waiting for that threat signature to come through, is really beneficial. Omnisoc is where it's early, right? Where we haven't experienced at Western any major events that would necessitate it. But when and if we do, it'd be great when we've got Omnisoc there to back us up and do some of that, some of the long haul work that our very small staff might not be able to do right away.
Andy, one of the things that I think of when I list or think back about all the logs that we send is some of the smaller incidents that we've experienced, being able to reach out to Omnisoc engineers and validate work that we've done in our initial investigation. Not only has that been very helpful to verify that, what you're seeing is actually what happened. And oh yeah, by the way, we may not have gotten far enough yet. But did you realize that this actually started 60 days ago rather than just last week? So we've experienced both of those where our initial findings are validated, but additional data is brought forward that helps in our investigation that it would have taken us a couple more days to get to, because the team was able. It's just like an extension of my team. They were able to chip in and provide additional resources.
It's always great to see. I'll just pause here real quick. Victor, have there been any audience questions yet?
Yes, actually, I have a couple questions here. I'll start with First one, it says, does Omnisoft provide quarterly reports that can be shared with E-team level stakeholders?
Yeah, we get, is it a quarterly or is it monthly? I think we get a monthly threat report, if I recall correctly, that we can share with our staff. And it actually shows threats that other members have seen, which is part of that whole idea of, I like to think of it as having really big ears, right? Because it's not just ourselves listening, but our peers, and we can see what they've seen before it comes to us, hopefully.
So Andy, I was going to say that I think we might actually get that report even more frequent than monthly. But I think the beauty of the Omnisoc, if there's something that we think we would like to see, we own the company, so to speak, right? So we can work with Omnisoc, and you know, they're always asking us, you know, how do we enhance the service? What can we do for you? So if there were specific, you know, dashboards or reports that we would want to see, they would be more than happy to work with us and produce that on our behalf. And that's something else I don't think you get when you buy an off-the-shelf kind of company to help you with your SOC work.
And that's a good point, Bill. I think that's been a topic of conversation at our monthly meetings is, you know, what else do we want? And we've talked specifically around executive level data that we could even potentially share with our boards in terms of activity that Omnisoc is helping fight off.
Yeah, and I'll also attest to the quality of that report that I believe Rob Carlson and Scott Orr put together. There may be others. Apologies if I'm missing them, but it's great level of detail, but also general enough so that a pointy hair like me can understand it. So.
And I think you already alluded to that in one of your answers, but there's another question here. It says, does Omnisoc provide a customer dashboard for us to see the various alerts and security information from our systems?
So that's something that at IU, we are actually paying a little bit extra to get an elastic dashboard. Correct me if I'm wrong, my colleagues, but I believe that since you all already have your own tools that you're using, you're using those. At IU, we didn't have a SIEM before, so we are more or less renting one from Omnisoc.
I think that's correct, Andy. I think we've talked about our analysts having access to the same dashboard that the Omnisoc engineers and analysts have, only so that we can kind of see what they're seeing and maybe participate in triage more real time. I think we're still kind of working out the challenges in either sending them by email or through other means, and then having our team validate, verify, and respond back. So a shared dashboard is something that we've been interested in. We're just not there yet.
I think the same for Rutgers, as Rick is saying. It would be nice to have, although I don't know that there's much I could do with it, right? I don't have the staff to do what Omnisoc does. If you we're on, I think it was Rob's session either yesterday or early today, just watching what they're doing. We're doing much more of, keeping the trains on time, so to speak, firewalls and things like that. We're not a threat hunting university. And that's where Omnisoc comes in. They're our threat hunter. So, having the knowledge and the understanding that they're doing a great job is what we're really buying into, not necessarily looking for them to train Rutgers people to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same in Northwestern. We don't have access to that dashboard, and we have other tools for that. type of thing that's getting the same data. But we rely on them to to provide the information we need when we need it, not necessarily through the dashboard.
Any others come in there, Victor?
There was one, some other people responded, but there was one earlier on said, as far as the mechanics of linking the Omnisoft with location, how does that work? And then the second part of that question is, what are the pricing schemes, and is it based on nodes monitored or networks monitored? Nodes.
Linking the location, I'm not sure I'm following there. That one. And for pricing, I think that's more of an individual thing that would get discussed when meeting one-on-one with the Omnisoc. And what was the third part of that question?
Well, it said, is it based on nodes monitored or the networks monitored as far as the pricing?
Yeah, again, for pricing questions, I would just refer you to when you actually sit down with the Omnisoc and have that conversation, because it's very tailored. The location thing, help me out with that. I'm not sure I got that first part.
It says, as far as the mechanics of linking the Omnisoft with location, how does that work?
Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe what's being asked is, how does Omnisoc get the data? I would ask my colleagues for that, since they're the ones that are at different locations than I am.
So this is Bill from Rutgers. And I think this was explained in one of the sessions yesterday that you could probably go back and look at it. I think everything's being recorded, but we have a node, and we all do. We have a node that sits on our campus that collects all of the data that we want to send to Omnisoc. So all of our net flow data, our IDS, our IPS, our AMP, whatever we describe that we're sending, and then it does a store and forward so that no data is lost in transition. So the data is on each of our campuses, and then the information goes into a isolated SIEM environment at Omnisoc. So right now, I think all three of us or four of us actually have our own environment, and I think they explained yesterday that they're looking at changing that because we are looking at bringing on smaller members. So, that way, you're not paying for, your own environment. You can take advantage of scale and keep the prices down to some degree.
Do you know if are you using beats for that, the elastic beats? I think we're doing something very similar with the store and forward using beats.
I'm not exactly sure. I know we're tapping the network all over and sending it over to it's a VM that runs in our environment. And, periodically the information gets transferred over to Indiana.
It's an important detail, that store and forward thing, because I think it was Scott that was talking about this yesterday. It's very nice not to have to replay logs if there's an outage. And I think there'll be more on that later this afternoon when Scott and company get into the nitty-gritty. Next up, anything else, Victor?
I think those are the questions. Those are all the questions for now. You gentlemen can carry on.
Okay. Yeah. Here's one that should be near and dear to every CISO's heart. Is we often see questions from leadership about what are we doing about blank, and I can totally relate to this question because I suspect it comes from conversations that leaders have with their peers and think, wow, what you just described going through a really horrible problem. I want to make sure that we're not going to go through that really horrible problem. And so those questions often come to us, and it also happens when you see a threat, cybersecurity threat in the headlines, and I'll get those from all over. Um, I'll just allow anyone on the panel to jump in on this one. What are the ways you use the Omnisoc in either anticipating or responding to those kind of inquiries? So something like, the Solarwinds supply chain attacks come to light, and everybody wants to know, including us. We're trying to figure out what is our situation, what are we doing? How can we use the Omnisoc in dealing with those situational awareness type issues?
So Andy, I'll jump in quick here. I think one of the things that's beneficial is the frequency in which we speak, right? So oftentimes I don't need to go to Omnisoc and ask, for that answer. They're already contacting me and telling me, what they're looking for. You mentioned Solarwinds, right? The nice thing about Solarwinds is we didn't really talk about it. They just went and looked at our historical data and let us know whether or not it looked like we had anything to worry about. So while we were doing things on our side, they were already doing it for us. The other thing that we have to get a little better at Rutgers is thinking about Omnisoc immediately as part of our playbook, right? So this is still kind of new. We're focusing, in our own world at times, and specifically with SolarWinds. And we're scrambling really quick to see what we may have as an issue, not realizing that Omnisoc was already looking at our data, and we need to be thinking about that immediately. They have to be part of your playbook, right? And we're looking at our playbooks today and making sure that we're inserting Omnisoc where they should be.
I think what I would add to Bill's response would be, very rarely do I see things that our executive team will ask for that are pertinent to only Nebraska. And so, being able to reach out to Omnisoc peers and validate that whatever the deliverable is valuable to everybody, helps us solve that problem maybe 4 times rather than just once. And I think we do that on a regular basis, where we may have the tendency to go out and build something custom just to what we want, making sure that we check with our partners first to see if there's value across the board in pursuing it, and then doing it together.
Yeah, specific to the SolarWinds, we were at the university. We just started our own, search for indicators of compromise, and found it rather difficult on our platforms just because of the sheer amount of data. So we were able to, go to Omnisoc right away and say, look, obviously we think you're already on this, and they were. What do you see for us? And they were able to turn it around in an hour versus us, just begrudgingly trying to push through logs going back, through last March. So that was a big help for my, my small team to be able to do that.
That is excellent. I know I like being able to tell people, tell my CIO, not only like whether or not we've had this activity at IU, but I can say, and none of the Omnisoc members have seen it either. Like this, here's our situation, much broader than we used to be able to relate to. So I'll ask, when you first joined, and this was touched on a little bit earlier, but there's obviously an onboarding process, and we've all got different technologies for IDS and other things, different equipment, and we've got to get those in communication with Omnisoc systems. We need to get our staff talking as well. So that's a process, and we heard Scott talk about that from the Omnisoc perspective. I'm just wondering about the member perspective, and again, anyone just jump in. Can you tell us how that unfolded for you? Were there any challenges, and how were those overcome?
I can share one that maybe we wouldn't think of, that actually happened twice. So the day that we started our commercial relationship with that managed security services provider, the immediate question from my team was, well, what are we doing wrong? Don't you trust us? And it's like, well, it's not that I don't trust you, but here's an insurance policy that's at our beck and call. If we miss something and they miss something, won't we feel better? And I think we had that same conversation. The environment that we had monitored commercially was much smaller than everything that we're doing with Omnisock today. We're sending everything that we have. And again, I think they were a little curious, don't you trust us? Don't you think we're capable of doing this? And my answer was, absolutely you're capable, but won't you be able to do it better if you have half a dozen to a dozen partners that are helping you, and they want to be as successful as you do in making sure we're identifying anything malicious that's going on. And so I think this particular Omnisock integration, they were more hands-on with, and that commercial one was they came in and did it for us. And so that was helpful. I think that they got to actually participate and touch it and meet the team, and that team was going to be the people that they were going to interact with going forward. And I think that made it a little more personable. But it's not one that I would have expected to face as a challenge until they brought it up.
I think I don't remember the detail, and it seems so long ago, even though it's only 3 years. But I know there was a lot of learning about what we were doing on both ends. What was Omnisock doing when they got the data from us? How are we getting the data to them? Yeah, there was a plan, but it was loosely defined, and we learned together. What I understand now is because of the initial members going through that, it's much more streamlined, right? So they can take all different types of data sets from, different members and bring it into the specific format that they need in their SIM today, which I don't think was as smooth as I heard it described yesterday. And I think they kind of, led us to believe that's because of what we went through, right? So now that we have all these different data sets, it's very easy for someone like, and I hope I'm characterizing this right, but it's going to be very easy for somebody like Santa Clara to get their data in the mix, where it was a little bit more difficult for the founding members.
Yeah, related to what Bill said, I think it also allowed us to focus on only sending the stuff that has value. It's not let's grab everything and jam it all over there. It's an ongoing conversation around what's good data and what's noise, and let's filter out the noise so that we only grab the stuff that's really going to bring us the best value.
Yeah, at Northwestern, our onboarding was pretty straightforward. We started with our primary logs, firewalls and IDS, but we've added others in the 2 years since, which have really increased the capabilities for Omnisoc to head off threats. And so, I think our biggest challenge was trying to figure out how to get the logs out of our SIM and then to forward it to Omnisoc. So it was more on our end than it was on Omnisoc's end, but I think we're in a good place now where we could onboard, and we are onboarding new data sources pretty easily. And Omnisoc is doing a great job on looking at those logs and determining how they're going to best use it in their threat hunting for us and all the other members.
There was a question here, and it related to that onboarding process. And someone asked, did anyone find themselves reducing cyber stuff after onboarding with Omnisoft?
Not at Indiana.
Not at Rutgers. As a matter of fact, we still need more staff to be able to protect the way we know we should be protecting.
And not at Nebraska either. It simply allowed us to focus them on other high profile items that we were not able to touch previously.
Yeah, same here at Northwestern. We haven't reduced staff. We've just moved, resources have moved to doing other security related tasks rather than start hunting.
I do wonder if we would be needing to hire more staff for intrusion detection and the like if it weren't for the Omnisoc. I have a feeling we probably would be asking for that. I don't know if it would be getting approved, but I think we might be asking if we didn't have the Omnisoc to lean on for that.
I'd like to throw out something else from as an Omnisoc member, and whether or not this continues, but there's other things that we get of value, not just around having our data triaged. We had a very successful student internship that Omnisoc supported for us, where the schools, the founding schools that could take advantage of it. Unfortunately, Northwestern is in a trimester, and there's never really the right space for that. But Indiana, Nebraska, and Rutgers took advantage of it. And we sent students to Indiana, where they worked with the Omnisoc team. They worked with Elastic. It was an invaluable experience for them. Many of these students had, from Rutgers, had not even traveled before. And, now they're out there, talking security with their peers. We've had people change degrees because of going out. Rick can tell a story about one of his folks that, became a security engineer based on his experience there. And we just recently hired one of those interns at Rutgers. And that was a great program, and that was really all spawned out of the Omnisoc, right? And things like that, I think are very good to be able to work with. That's the type of relationship that is built within the Omnisoc. It's more than not that they don't, but it's more than just sending your data there and looking for anomalies. So I just wanted to throw that out there too. I think it's important that people understand that it's not your average SOC.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point, Bill. I mean, that's never something you would get from your commercial managed SOC, an internship program with an on-site and local component for you. Yeah, we had great returns from that as well. We also just hired somebody who went through the intern program. And it's just, it's great to be able to tackle this this problem that we often complain about of the talent gap and not having enough folks coming in that have the real skills. And, a program where you talk about people that are able to actually look at alerts coming in and learn how to deal with that. That's an invaluable skill for somebody coming into the team.
And there was one more question here. It's related to workflow processes. It says, what is the escalation process from Omnisoc to our internal security staff for remediations? Is it email-based, or do you offer integration with ticketing systems?
For us, it's email-based, but it's an email into our ticketing system.
It's the same thing for Northwestern.
Yeah, it sounds like it's the same for all of us, email.
Same in Nebraska.
It strikes me that's another thing that we could probably talk about if we didn't like it. For us, it works well because we have a special queue in our ticketing system that all those tickets go into. And our team is directed to take action on those immediately because there's such high confidence. I mean, Bill was talking earlier about how high confidence the alerts are, and I agree. Our engineers locally on our security team don't need to go through a whole process of treating this like an everyday alert that they might get from some ISP or who knows where, and have to go through logs and validate that it's real. We're able just to assume that it's real and take action right away.
I think we also talked at one point in time, one of the schools, based on the confidence level of the alert, about actually having the Omnisoc act on that alert on our own networks, right? So that, we're not quite there yet, but we were talking about that, and not even worrying about, so much, yes, we get the information of a ticket and stuff, but they actually follow up and mitigate it on our behalf. So I don't know if any of us are actually doing that yet, but I know there was some discussion around the possibility of Omnisock offering that type of a service for us.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has actually acted on it yet, though.
No, I'm excited about that possibility as well, but that's not something that we're doing yet.
I guess when you're in higher ed, the first time you turn off a faculty member's machine, if it's not perfect, it could be a problem, right?
Well, and I think, not to get too far into the weeds, but I was watching a session yesterday where there was a question asked of what sources, if there's anything we could do as members to make the service work better, is to have a complete asset inventory and that we can provide to the Omnisoc, so they know, they do know some of our most high value targets, but so they have the more thorough picture they have of that, the better they're able to give us alerts that are not false positives. I assume that becomes even more crucial if we were to talk about them actually taking mitigation steps. They would want to be darn sure they're not, taking down a domain controller or something. Victor, any other questions?
Yes, I think one more just came in, and I think Andy, you touched on it a little bit. It says, because of the collaboration with Omnisoc, have you found it easier to have those important conversations with the executive teams, showing them the benefit of adding more staff to your security teams?
Yeah, I would go back to it's great to be able to put those conversations in a context of, no, we haven't seen this here, and the Omnisoc hasn't seen it either. This threat, for example, just to get a picture of, is it, are we just lucky, or is it just not impacting higher ed in general? Those kinds of conversations become easier. And, we have been able to do that in the past with things like the BTAA, as I discussed, and of course the Ren ISAC, but the real benefit here is just, it's even closer to real time than those other relationships.
So I'm not sure I understood the question correctly, but what I thought I heard you say was, is my membership in Omnisoc enabled me to talk to leadership to get more resources for security?
Yeah, more stuff, for your security.
And I think, although right now it's a difficult time to get more resources for security, very few of us lost any security resources. Rutgers, we've happened to be able to get some additional resources with security. And I think a lot of that is because of the conversations that you can bring back. And, not only is it the CISOs, but it's also the CIOs are involved in these conversations, at least at the, in the BTAA, right? So I don't know, what the Omnisoc will grow to, but they're very, and they spoke about it today at 11 o'clock, they're very in tune with what Omnisoc is doing, and they talk to one another. But I think having the personal information from your peers definitely helps you to, when you're going back looking for resources or protecting the loss of resources, and you can kind of compare yourself to your peers and what they're doing, it certainly helps. I don't know that being a member of a SOC necessarily does that, but I think the type of relationship that Omnisoc has can certainly help that.
Yeah, I can't think of any opportunities at Nebraska that we've gotten additional resources directly related to being a member of Omnisoc, but I do think that having Omnisoc in that picture has allowed us to maintain resources when other units across the campuses are getting them taken away. And I think Omnisoc has helped us tell a better security story. And we can point out that while they continue to do a piece of it for us, we still have people available to do some of the other parts that maybe we weren't doing as good at before, in terms of road mapping, analyzing other services that we have out there, and making sure we get the best value out of all of those. But yeah, I can't think of using them as a part of an argument or a conversation to get additional resources yet. It's an interesting concept though. I use Andy and Bill as a way to try to get additional resources, and Noel.
I look at that as a side product of the Omnisoc though, right? Because we're tied in there, so.
Yeah, those are great insights. I mean, I think there's something to be said for when you're asking for more resources to show how efficiently you're using the resources you already have. And if you can say, we're taking advantage of this great collaboration that we have so that our staff can work on things where we can't get that way from a collaboration, then we're sort of showing, look, if you give us more staff, we're going to use them in this same smart kind of way. And we won't squander them on duplicative activities. Sorry, Noel, I think I cut you off there maybe.
No, I was just going to agree. It's it's always that balance between the resources that you have on site or working directly for you versus third party. What's the better use of people's time? And it's really on a per organization basis, but we're not alone in using SOCs, right? And we've all kind of used them in some way, shape, or form. This Omnisoc really helps us because it's a higher ed focus. I think, in my opinion, that's really the benefit.
Very good. Victor, anything else for us?
No more questions on my end. I don't see anything. So,
okay.
You gentlemen have a few more thoughts to wrap it up, or?
Yeah, are there any parting thoughts from our panel? I think we've reached the end of our prepared questions. Hearing none, I won't keep you all any longer, and I hope to see you all in the threat hunting session later today at 3 p.m. I believe it is. And thank you for attending, and that's 3 p.m. Eastern, by the way. Thank you for attending, and we'll see you later. Enjoy the rest of the conference.